All right, hello everybody. Looks like we still have probably a number of people are going to jump on this one, but we're going to get started just because there's a lot to cover. It's mainly an introductory slide too, so it'll give people some time to get on. But I want to thank everybody for joining. And my name is Tony Vieira, just to introduce myself real quick. And I've been with Carlisle for a little over 5 years now. Started out as a field service representative, so did a lot of inspections for warranty, did job site visits, job startups, really a lot of time spent in the field. And then about the last, I'd say 2.5 years, I've been in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, really in a full-time technical training role. So I want to mention that the material in this particular webinar is really taken from our we call them our continuing roofing education and workshops trainings. And these are in-person trainings that are designed for classroom and hands-on learning of our products and accessories. And of course, hands-on is of course the best way to learn. We're currently trying to really get these back up and running due to the current situation with COVID, but we'll have a slide at the end that'll kind of talk about where to go to reference these courses that are coming up. If you want to attend any here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania in the future. So I want to mention real quick how to type in questions for anybody who may have one throughout the webinar. So if you look on your screen, you should see like a little caret icon with a question, the text question next to it. If you click on that, you should find a little box where you can basically type in, and that way you can ask any questions, and I can try to field those as we go. I think we're going to have a decent amount of people on the call, but like I said, I'll try to field those as we go, and then hopefully there's some time left at the end to answer any additionals. So with that, we'll get started. So really the purpose of this webinar, the main principle of it is to talk about FleeceBACK membrane installation. So that is fleece membrane really adhered with flexible fast adhesive. Okay, there are some other options. There's asphalt compatible FleeceBACK, for example. There's fire rated FleeceBACK, so that's a mechanically fastened membrane direct to a combustible deck. But by far and large, the majority of what we sell and what most people are probably ever going to see is going to be FleeceBACK adhered with flexible fast adhesive. And flexible fast is exactly what we see them applying in this picture. And then FleeceBACK membrane is just essentially membrane with fleece on it. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It's actually membrane manufactured, really we say using a hot melt extrusion process. And it really joins 55 mil fleece to the underside of the membrane. This is available in TPO, PVC, and our PVC KEHP membrane and EPDM as well. And one note, I will reference the word bareback throughout this webinar. So when I refer to that, I'm talking about basically non-fleece membrane, so just our standard bareback membrane. You can actually see a little section of it in this slide right here where my cursor is. That is a seam area. We leave the edges of the sheet basically without fleece on them. So that you can complete seams there. So just to note that when I reference bareback throughout the webinar, it's basically just a comparison. And then we will talk about RapidLock at the very end. I think it's just really one slide on that, just because that is part of the FleeceBACK family. It's actually in the same specification section as our standard FleeceBACK membrane that is adhered with the flexible fast adhesive. So that is RapidLock, by the way, just to give you a quick note on it, that's the Velcro technology FleeceBACK membrane. So just kind of hang tight on that one. Now this slide right here, this is basically just an image that shows, I would say, the basic concept of a typical adhered FleeceBACK system. And I do want to mention that in this slide, this number 1, it states KEE membrane. That's basically just, I took this image from our, the PVC image that we have in our, on our website, but it would be the same concept with EPDM or TPO FleeceBACK, for example. So just to make that point, but to kind of talk through this image from the bottom up, you would have your deck, And then the insulation, it's represented by this number 3. That could be either adhered with flexible fast adhesive to the deck, or it could be mechanically fastened. And then you would use flexible fast adhesive to adhere whatever FleeceBACK membrane you're adhering to the insulation or to your substrate. So that would be another benefit, is that you have really, if you're adhering the insulation, you can use with FleeceBACK the same adhesive for the insulation as you can for the FleeceBACK membrane itself. And that is not the case with bareback membrane, for example. If it was bareback membrane, you would have to use a different adhesive for the membrane than with the insulation, for example. And then real quick, another benefit is of using the flexible fast, if you were to adhere the insulation, for example, is difficult deck types. So like gypsum, tectum, structural concrete, for example, flexible fast can be an easier application on those particular decks. So just to make that point. And then to note some other benefits that you could see from it, I do want to mention that FleeceBACK systems can be used on any project that a fully adhered single-ply bareback system can be used on. FleeceBACK systems are considered an adhered system. So to talk through the main benefits in this slide, you have really a reduction in odors. There's really little to no odor when it comes to the flexible fast adhesive. So noise, obviously, if we're adhering both the insulation and the FleeceBACK membrane, then there's no fasteners and plates going into the deck. And then VOCs, the flexible fast adhesive has no VOCs, so huge benefit when it comes to that urethane adhesive. Flexible fast is a urethane adhesive. So where these things are primarily a benefit, of course, is like mission critical facilities, like what we see right here. These are facilities where the occupants can't just not perform their functions inside these buildings when construction's going on. So, having these benefits right here, really causing the owner, the occupants, the least amount of disturbance possible, is really a huge benefit to the owner. So, and right here we see some other advantages. You can see again, FleeceBACK TPO, PVC, and EPDM are all options that we have. Wind uplift performance, just to give an example of that real quick, you can actually get anybody who's familiar with FM, you can get an FM 1-990 direct to a concrete deck with flexible fast adhesive and FleeceBACK. Again, I kind of mentioned this before, but the flexible fast can be used both for the insulation and membrane securement. And then flexible fast adhesive does actually add some R value. I think that's another benefit that a lot of people may not be aware of. So right here we have another benefit that I think some people may not be aware of, and that is the advantage of being able to basically adhere the FleeceBACK membrane directly to an existing single ply membrane. So that's exactly what we're seeing right here. Our guide specifications basically talk about some of the requirements that would be needed to clean and prepare the existing membrane prior to adhering to it. I'm not going to get into all the details of that in this, but I just want people to know that this is an option. But real quick, just to make the point, we don't promote this or allow it over existing PVC membrane. So just to make that point. And then some of the other advantages of the 55 mil fleece. I will say that FleeceBACK membranes are actually measured by the total thickness of the membrane and the fleece. So just as an example, if you had 60 mil TPO as an example, add 55 to that, and in the FleeceBACK world, that becomes 115 mil membrane is how we consider that, okay? Take 45 mil TPO, add 55, you get 100. So just some examples there. And that fleece added to the membrane has the benefits really that we see down here. So you have really increased tear resistance, puncture resistance. Actually, FleeceBACK membranes are really about on average 30% better regarding puncture resistance than their bareback counterpart. And regarding hail, we've actually seen FleeceBACK systems withstand up to 4-inch hail, just as an example. So just to note these benefits. And then now we'll get into some of the adhesive, the container options that we have right in front of us here. So we'll start with, real quick before I start with that, I want to mention that all of these container options that you see right here are going to come with a Part A and a Part B. Okay, so it's a urethane adhesive, but it basically it relies on that even mixture between the two parts for that interaction and that strength of the adhesive long term. So that is why you'll always see a Part A and a Part B. The dual cartridges, those are these little guys that we see right here, probably wouldn't make a lot of sense on a big project. You'd be replacing them constantly, and they do take a battery operated gun to use those. But like I said, small projects, they would maybe make sense, but anything very large, probably not. The dual tanks, I have another image of showing you what they look like outside of the box, but they're basically they look like tanks that are actually inside of these boxes right here. Those are a really, really nice common option. Like I said, we'll talk more about them coming up, but they come with all the pieces and the parts that you need to actually install the adhesive. You don't need any special or fancy equipment to use those. Give me 1 second. Somebody asked, say, can flexible fast be used to adhere insulation to a metal deck, or are screw fasteners required? So the answer is yes, you can use the flexible fast to adhere to a steel deck, but you have to hit the top flutes, of course, because if you're hitting the bottom flutes, it's not going to stick. And so you have to run parallel with the flutes when you're installing. So if you have like a B deck, for example, just run, if you're familiar with beads, when you're applying the fast adhesive via the bead method, you would apply the adhesive parallel with the flutes and make sure you're always hitting the top flutes. So anyway, the 5-gallon jugs, 15-gallon drums, and 50-gallon drums, basically those are going to need carts or rigs to actually utilize those options. So those are going to be generally, of course, for larger volume applicators. And we'll talk about some of those carts and those rigs coming up in the next slide here. So I want to mention that with all of these adhesives that we see, all of our flexible fast adhesive, the temperature parameters. So we have right here, basically the ambient temperature can be as low as 25 degrees. But the adhesive must be at least 70 degrees upon application. So if you go out and you're applying it in those colder temperatures, you need to make sure that that adhesive inside the tank or the jug, whatever it is kept warmer. And how you generally do that is what's called power blankets, for example. And I have a talking point and slide coming up on those. So just to make that point. Now the maximum ambient temperature we do say is 120 degrees. So just to make that point. Okay, so these are some of the flexible fast, the rigs and the carts. All right, so these guys that we see over here on the left-hand side, just to name them, just for anybody who's curious about them, this is called the Easy Loader. Patriot Junior is this guy right here, the middle option, and then the OMG Pace Cart is at the top right here. And these will take, you can use 5-gallon jugs or 15-gallon drums with these three options. And then the Patriot 55, the Hulk, and the Predator rig, those you can use 15-gallon drums or 50-gallon drums. So again, larger applicator most likely is who's going to be using these types of carts or these types of rigs, especially when you get into like this Hulk or this Predator rig right here. I will say that the Predator rig has kind of a unique spray option. It can actually do what we call a full spray option. And I have a slide where I'll show you an image of that. I realize not everybody has this, but for anybody who does or is interested, you can kind of see that. So, and then I will note that especially with some of these bigger options, really any of these options, you should have somebody, companies should have somebody who can actually service and maintain these, not just use them, because they do take service and they do take maintenance. So just to make that point. And right here, that'll kind of lead us on into this slide for questions on like where to purchase those carts or those rigs, for example. Carlisle is really the only manufacturer that has a dedicated FleeceBACK team, and the same team that's a dedicated urethane adhesive team as well. So just to make that point, and then what you can do is you could contact your rep, like I said, if you had questions on those carts or those rigs, but they may also, or they may in turn just end up contacting one of these guys that we see on this sheet right here, and they're based on region basically. So if you just go to carlislesyntec.com and type in FleeceBACK Team under the search menu, you'll see this result come up. You'll see this sheet, and you can basically find your representative based on your region of the country. And like I said, they could help you get in touch with who you would need to purchase those rigs or those carts. I want to mention that. Give me 1 second here. No, I think that's really it for this this particular slide right here. So like I said, just go to carlislesyntec.com, type in FleeceBACK Team, and you could find this sheet that you see right here. Flexible fast dual tanks. These are the dual tanks in this image that I showed you right here that are in the boxes. So like I said, these come with all the pieces and parts that are necessary to actually apply the adhesive. You don't need any fancy equipment with these or anything like that. They're very, very easy to dispose of. Basically, when you're done with them, there's a punch out valve. You can just punch that out and dispose of them. So the only thing they don't come with that's in this slide, they don't come with these power blankets that we see right here. These power blankets are sold separately, but we do actually sell the power blankets that would go on the dual tanks. So these options right here. We just started selling them not too long ago, actually. But these would come back to the whole temperature thing that I was referring to earlier. So I was telling you we can take the flexible fast, we can take the flexible fast adhesive down to 25 degrees for ambient temperature, but the adhesive inside the containers itself has to be kept over 70 degrees. So we want to use these power blankets really just to maintain the temperature of the adhesive in the tanks. We actually find if those tanks get cold and you just put a power blanket on it, like what we see in this image, it actually takes a really, really long time to bring this adhesive up to the right temperature, to bring it over 70 degrees inside of those tanks. So you want the tanks to be warm before you actually bring it into a colder environment. Again, the power blankets are just used to maintain the heat of the adhesive inside of them. So there are some other heating blanket options available for larger containers. The rep or the FleeceBACK team member that I mentioned in this slide right here, for example, they could reference you in regards to some of those other heating blanket options, where to purchase them basically, because we don't sell the other options through us. And the one thing I kind of drew a blank on this slide, I knew I was missing something. If you had any questions on troubleshooting for the rigs or the carts, for example, as it pertains to our flexible fast adhesive, you could also reach out to one of these FleeceBACK team members. So just to make that point. Okay, so right here we see some of the different application methods that you can use with the flexible fast adhesive. So this one on the far left is probably not overly common, because really the only option that you have for this one is that Predator rig that I showed you in this slide right here. So if you remember this guy, basically, that has the capability of doing this full spray option where it actually sprays and it covers the entire surface, essentially 100%. So you would need the 15 or 50 gallon drums to do that, because that's what you would use with the Predator rig. You can use this method to do both insulation and FleeceBACK membrane. And we say for proper coverage with this, we say the adhesive should be between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 inch thick after foaming is how you know you're applying it at the right coverage. Now with all these options here, real quick, before I get into the others, you always want to wait for what's called string time. And this is a really big concept. It's basically the window of time that the adhesive is actually ready for either the insulation or the FleeceBACK membrane to be applied into it. So just to make that point now, string time, I have a slide coming up on that that'll talk more about it, but we say it generally happens between, and this is normal, like room temperature, it will happen between 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. Obviously, the hotter it is outside, the sunnier it is, the faster that can happen. The colder it is, the slower that can happen. That's why it needs to be checked for, basically. So you actually would take a glove, for example, you would dip it into the adhesive, and you would separate your fingers, and what you want to see is strings developing between your fingers. And that is basically what we call string time. Again, that's the window of time that the adhesive is good to go. Now, if it's still wet, it's not ready yet. It hasn't reached that string time. If it's clumping, when you separate your fingers, then it's too dry. So just to make that point before I move on to these other methods, extruded. So all of our container options can do this, from the dual cartridges, the dual tanks, all the way up to the 50-gallon drums. Even the Predator rig has an option to where you can either do this full spray that we see right here, or these bead applied option, or this bead applied option, I should say, that we see on this slide. So you'll see that the bead spacing options that we would have in our specification, we say 4 inches on center, 6 inches on center, or 12 inches on center. Obviously, the tighter the bead spacing, the more adhesive we're using. So on like higher wind speed warranties, for example, we're going to require tighter bead spacing. So to make this point, obviously not everybody has that Predator rig that I was referring to. So if you don't, that's fine. If we say full spray is required in our specifications for warranty, we consider 4 inches on center bead spacing to be equivalent to full spray, excuse me. So just to make that note. And then this method can be used to secure both insulation and FleeceBACK membrane. I do want to make the point real quick that all of the container options, except for the dual tanks, when you apply the adhesive, you're going to see it's going to be, just like he's applying this image, doing it right here, it's going to be this kind of dark, it's going to be a wet bead, and it's going to be that darker color that you see. And then it's going to basically expand and foam from there. It's going to become this almost lighter blue color that you see right here. For all the options, as I said, other than the dual tanks, we say it should be a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch wet bead when it actually is applied to the deck, because it's going to foam and expand a decent amount from there. The dual tanks, it actually, when you apply it via the dual tanks with this method, it actually comes out already kind of like a foam body. It doesn't expand or rise as much from there as the other options. So we actually say out of the dual tanks, it should be 1.5 inches thick bead when it hits the, if I said deck earlier, I should say substrate, whatever the substrate is. So just to make that point. And then the splatter method that we see over here, the only way to currently do this method is via the dual tanks. So the dual tanks actually come with, as I said, each set comes with a hose, a gun, it comes with the tips, and it even comes with some extension tips. The extension tips are what you would use to apply the beads, like what we see in this image right here. If you wanted to do the splatter method, it basically takes that gun further away from the deck or from the substrate, and then the name describes exactly what it is. Basically, you're splattering that adhesive onto the substrate, and we just say 50% coverage of the substrate is sufficient with that method. We used to say 85, we actually reduced it, it is now 50. So just to make that point, I would contact our project analysts or our design and review team if you ever want to use this method. There's a lot of variables on when it can be acceptable, but it does have some benefits. It's quick, and you don't have the potential of the beads telegraphing through the membrane. Sometimes people will say, especially on like the EPDM, when you install the FleeceBACK membrane over top of it, those beads can kind of telegraph through just a little bit. I do want to note that generally when that happens, it's usually because the membrane was actually placed in when the adhesive was too dry, basically past that string time. If you get that membrane into the adhesive during string time and roll over top of it with a 150-pound roller, you should not have that issue nearly to the extent. So just to note that. But moving on from there, this is our coverage rate chart. If you actually were to go to CarlisleSynTec.com, our website, and just type in adhesive quick reference chart, you would actually see the coverage rates for all of our adhesives. This one in particular, or this part of the chart, is just referencing the flexible fast adhesive, the different container options. And then you can see it's just got your different coverage rates based on whichever method you use, whether it's like the full spray, for example, whether it's 4-inch, 6-inch, or 12-inch on center, splatter, whatever method you're using. So. And then installing the FleeceBACK into the flexible fast adhesive, again, we want to make sure we keep our temperature parameters in mind. Now, I didn't mention it with the dual tanks. It's really the case with all of our adhesives. I was talking about power blankets and that. We actually, we say the adhesive needs to be at least 70 degrees. We actually don't want the adhesive itself to be over 90 degrees. We realize it's going to get over 90 outside sometimes. If it does get over 90, we basically say cover the adhesive with like a white material, so like a white tarp, for example, especially if it's in sunlight, just to keep that adhesive cooler. So just to note that point. But in terms of installing the FleeceBACK into the flexible fast adhesive, what you're going to do is you're obviously going to apply the flexible fast. You're going to wait for that string time. So that's exactly what we're seeing here in this slide. You can see when you separate your fingers, you should see strings developing between them. That is our window of time that we're ready to go. And then after you've installed the FleeceBACK membrane into the flexible fast, you would then roll over it with a 150-pound weighted roller. So that's what he's doing in this slide right here. Now I do want to note with FleeceBACK, it's a little bit different than like bareback membrane when you're just utilizing standard like contact adhesive, for example, like our 90-8-30A. When you're doing it with bareback membrane, or when you're using a contact adhesive with bareback membrane, you would want to fold that sheet, you know, in half widthwise, really, and then that's called barn dooring, and then you would apply that adhesive to both the membrane and the substrate. But with FleeceBACK membrane, we want to work with the string time. So what we would say you want to do is basically you want to unroll that whole, you know, if it's a 100-foot roll, unroll the whole 100 feet. Make sure that your seams are lined up, and then you could fold back like 50 feet, for example, of that sheet. And then, so about half of it, but lengthwise, you would apply the adhesive in front of the sheet. And then that way you're working with the string time. You're actually placing the FleeceBACK membrane into the adhesive as string time is occurring. And then again, once that happens, you can roll over top of it with a 150-pound roller. Obviously, after you're done with one side of the sheet, you would take the other half, take it back 50 feet, whatever's left, and then do that side via the same method. So now we're going to get into some of the details for FleeceBACK membrane, and there's actually a lot of similarities with the details between FleeceBACK and bareback membrane. So I'm mainly going to note the differences in details between bareback and FleeceBACK membrane. So really, field seams are really going to be done the same way as far as the factory edges as bareback membrane. So just to note that what we see in this image, if it's EPDM, for example, you're going to have factory applied tape always on our FleeceBACK membrane. So you can see this is the fleece right here. This is our factory applied tape. So the field seams like this are done the exact same way. End laps, however, you're going to have that fleece in place on the end laps. And you can't take one sheet at an end lap, overlap it onto the bottom sheet, and then weld with that fleece still in place. So what we actually say to do on EPDM is we say to butt the two sheets together with a max inch gap between the two, and then obviously clean it if it needs cleaned, and then prime it with EPDM primer, and then strip it in with our pressure sensitive cured cover strip product. That's good up to a 20-year warranty, what we see in this detail right here. 25, 30-year warranties, we actually require a second layer at the end laps. We require a layer of 12-inch wide, well, excuse me, 12-inch wide uncured elastoform over top of the cured cover strip. So just to make that note. And then 25, 30-year warranties would have to be the 6-inch factory applied tape. So TPO and PVC, see in this slide right here, 1 second. TPO and PVC, basically the, again, factory edges There's nothing different between bareback membrane and FleeceBACK membrane. We leave the fleece off the factory edge, that way you can get your weld right there. The end laps, again, are going to be the one where it's different. So what we say to do with end laps, same as with EPDM, butt the two sheets together with an inch gap max. If you overlap them just a little bit, that is okay. But we don't want that gap to be over an inch. And then for TPO and PVC, you would overlay those end laps with reinforced bareback membrane. And it needs to be the same thickness as the counterpart of the FleeceBACK membrane that's being used. So just as an example, if you're using 115 mil TPO FleeceBACK, that's 60 mil bareback membrane joined to the 55 mil fleece. So you would want to use 60 mil reinforced bareback TPO, for example, to strip in those end laps, like what we see right here in the detail. You could either cut your own if you have bareback membrane that's the right thickness, or we actually sell those strips pre-cut for you. So you can see we sell them in different thicknesses and different widths. So just as an example there, that can make your life a little easier. And right here we have the PVC option. So if you have a PVC job, we sell strips pre-cut as well that you can use for end laps on that job. There's no difference, by the way, with the end laps on TPO and PVC if it's a 25, 30 year versus a 20 year or less. I mean, up to a 30 year, you need to strip in the end laps the same way. Just get an 1.5 inch weld on each side of that end lap. So, and then this detail right here, we're actually going to spend some time on this one because this is really a big detail in the FleeceBACK world, and it actually represents, I think, a really big benefit of using FleeceBACK membrane. And that is that the flexible fast is really strong enough with that bond between it and the FleeceBACK membrane that we don't always require inside angle change securement or mechanical securement, as they may call it, when we have inside angle changes at like the base of a wall, like what we're seeing right here. So you can actually continue that sheet solid through the wall, just like we do right here on this image, without fasteners and plates. If we're doing the bead applied method, we want to have a double bead within 3 inches of the base of that wall, just like what we see right here. If we're doing splatter or the full spray method out of like that Predator rig I was talking about, we would just do the same pattern throughout. There's no difference. But anyway, again, you just take it right through the wall without additional membrane securement. Always exceptions, of course. So when we do need additional membrane securement, if you look at this note number 1, we say specified warranties greater than 20 years, warranty wind speeds greater than 90 miles an hour, and then projects with control or expansion joints or anticipated building movement. So just as an example, if this was a deck to wall expansion joint right here, we would want to have additional membrane securement. And one way to do that, this shows a very resourceful way right here in this image to actually achieve that with the FleeceBACK membrane itself. You would actually cut the FleeceBACK membrane into at least a 9-inch wide strip. What we're showing here is actually flipping the strip upside down so that the fleece side is facing up, and then you fasten that into the deck 12 inches on center. And when you do that, you would apply your double bead, for example, if you were doing the bead applied method, onto that strip. And that fleece to fleece bond with that flexible fast is incredibly strong. But yeah, we're confident that that is not going to pull away from that angle change over time. So that's the concern, is of course that the membrane is going to come loose at the base of that wall over time. But this is a nice method because we're still able to run that sheet solid right through the angle change, and we don't have a seam that we have to address later. And also because we don't have a seam, it's less chance of a leak, of course. So just a very nice method to do that. Now, over here, what we're showing in this option basically is separate wall flashing. So if you don't run that sheet continuous through the angle change, like what we see right here, we do allow bareback membrane to be used to flash walls on FleeceBACK jobs. So that is what we're seeing right here. I don't know if it actually mentions bareback membrane in this particular detail, but that is allowed. The benefit of using bareback membrane on walls, for example, in this instance, as we see, would be because you don't have fleece in the area where your seam's going to be. If you had fleece there, you wouldn't be able to achieve a weld or a splice if it was EPDM, for example. So just to make that distinction. Now, this basically is kind of a counterpart detail to this one. It's just showing separate wall flashing, as I said. But yeah, here we have, this is if there's not angle change securement required. And then if we do require it via one of these three options right here, if we hit one of these three criteria, we would need to fasten the field membrane 12 inches on center, just like over here, only we're fastening through the field sheet, and then our separate wall flashing gets installed over top of that, spliced past the edge of the fastener and plate, as we see right here. So I do want to take a second, though, to mention when you're retrofitting or adhering FleeceBACK membrane direct to existing single ply membrane. We don't really cover that in this detail right here, but we do say if you're installing FleeceBACK direct to existing single ply, if you remember me saying that was a benefit towards the beginning of this presentation, when you're doing that, we say to either fasten through the existing membrane 12 inches on center, even if there's already fasteners and plates there. They may obviously, if they've been there a while, they may not be holding as well as they should be anymore. You either fasten through the existing membrane 12 inches on center, or you can just use like one of these two options, for example, and secure both the existing and the new membrane. The reason why we at least need to fasten through the existing membrane before we install the new FleeceBACK membrane is because we're only as secure as the existing membrane is at the base of that wall. If that existing membrane is loose or comes loose, then it's just going to, the new membrane that's installed is going to be loose as well, of course. So that is the reason for that, and that is mentioned in our FleeceBACK specifications as well as the FleeceBACK guide specifications. So another thing that I will note is if you look right here, it says applicable bonding adhesive on the walls for each of these details. So let's focus on this one though first. So if it's FleeceBACK membrane that's getting adhered to the wall, the only way that we can use flexible fast adhesive on a wall is if we use like that Predator rig that I was talking about that has the full spray option. The problem with the other options is tends to that fast adhesive or that flexible fast kind of basically just sag and fall down on that wall. It doesn't perform as well as it should long term. So unless you have that Predator rig option, we really say you need to use another type of adhesive, so an applicable bonding adhesive. So like Cav Grip 3, for example, would be just fine. Like 90-8-30A would be just fine. So if it was Cav Grip 3 used to adhere the FleeceBACK membrane, you would just have to apply a coat to the FleeceBACK side on the wall, and then a coat to the wall, to the substrate itself. We say for walls, just do a 50% overlap from pass to pass when you're applying that Cav grip. And then for standard bonding adhesive, if you use that to adhere the FleeceBACK membrane to the wall, we actually say, like if it's 90-8-30A, for example, you would want to apply 2 coats to the FleeceBACK at least. So what most guys are going to do, they're going to apply a coat to the fleece side, they're going to apply a coat to the wall, and then they're going to apply a second coat to the FleeceBACK side. And the reason why is that first coat, that fleece is going to absorb so much of that bonding adhesive. So that's the main reason that the Cav Grip 3, I would say, would be the more popular option. It's just going to be a lot easier than having to apply that double coat if you're using like standard contact adhesive, for example, like 90-8-30A. So realizing that not everybody has that Predator rig that I was talking about, that's why we allow those adhesive applications on the wall. But in the field of the roof, we want to stick to the flexible fast adhesive. That really is the optimal performing product when it comes to the FleeceBACK membrane. It actually embeds into that membrane. So the question always comes up when we show this in class. They say, well, can I use Cav Grip 3, for example, on the field of the roof? And the answer is no. We want that flexible fast adhesive used in the field. So just to make that distinction as well. And then over here, if it's bareback membrane, we can never use flexible fast adhesive. We have to use an applicable bonding adhesive, which again, Cav Grip 3 tends to be the easiest to use. And what we show right here is water cut-off mastic and FleeceBACK. This is another major difference that you'll see with FleeceBACK membrane. So the problem with FleeceBACK and water cut-off mastic, if that fleece is not singed, like what we see in this picture right here, if you have water cut-off mastic in that area, that fleece is going to just absorb or wick water, basically. So what we say to do, some of our details may say, remove the fleece. What we're essentially referring to is just singeing it. So if you take like a hand welder, for example, and actually apply heat to the back side of that FleeceBACK membrane, you're going to start to see what we have right here. You might have to do a couple passes. What we see here is pretty much ideal. You see just a little bit of gray. There's maybe just a tad bit of fleece left, but not enough that it's going to wick moisture. The top and bottom, you see right here, the fleece is still left in place. Fleece is still left in place, so we wouldn't want that if the water cut-off mastic was going in those areas. But essentially what this is doing is this is allowing a watertight gasket between the membrane and whatever surface that water cut-off mastic is in contact with. So just to note that distinction. Now, one thing, like I said, when it says, if you look at any of our details and it says remove, this is the preferred method. I've actually talked to our FleeceBACK team. We find when guys apply heat to the membrane and then try to actually like scrape it and remove any of this stuff off, it can actually damage the membrane, cause more harm than good over time. So, and then the last thing I'll mention is you don't want to apply too much heat either. If you, this is TPO, for example, that we see right here. That's why it's black on the back side. If you were to apply heat to this to try to singe the fleece and that turned like just a total black color, like charcoal or just black, you're probably applying too much heat, and that can cause issues with the membrane, even the outer or exposed side of the membrane at that location long term. So like I said, enough to singe the fleece, but not so much that we're damaging the membrane. So right here is just an example of a detail with that. So basically we have the FleeceBACK membrane is going into the drain that we see right here. And this is just representing that we have singed the fleece at this location in order to stop it from wicking moisture over time. This right here is just an image of that having been done. So we've singed the fleece right here. You can see that the fleece is still intact right here. So this is the bottom side of the membrane. It's going to get rolled over top of this drain bowl that we see. The water cut-off mastic is going to go right here. And by singeing that fleece, again, that allows us to have a watertight gasket right there. So other option we allow in drains, kind of like on wall flashing. At drains, we say you can do a target splice of bareback membrane. As long as it's the right thickness, you can basically just adhere with an applicable bonding adhesive. So we can't use flexible fast adhesive with bareback membrane, but like Cap Grip 3, for example, could be used. And you would adhere that membrane into the drain area. And then at that point, you don't have to remove, or excuse me, you don't have to singe the fleece at that water cutoff mastic location because there's no fleece to singe. You've got that watertight gasket there. Then you would obviously overlap it onto the FleeceBACK membrane and either weld or splice it with seam tape if it was EPDM. So obviously, like I said, weld if it was TPO or PVC, or splice it with seam tape if it was TPO, or excuse me, if it was EPDM. And then right here we have termination bar. This is just another example of a detail where we have to singe the fleece. So all we've done here, all this is showing is just this is a FleeceBACK membrane running up a wall, and the fleece is definitely, it's been singed at this location is what we're showing. That way we get our watertight gasket. This is just down here is our universal detail. So as I was saying, we can do bareback membrane. We can actually adhere that on vertical walls. If we do that, we don't have to singe the fleece. So we can use this detail on a FleeceBACK system. And then now we'll just kind of, about the last slide, we'll talk just briefly about RapidLock. So RapidLock, I think I said it at the beginning, is really in the FleeceBACK family. It is actually a type of fleece on the underside of the membrane. The specifications for this and the details are actually in the same specification section as our FleeceBACK membrane that would be adhered with flexible fast adhesive. So basically what you have is Velcro technology here. So it's a, Carlisle, by the way, is partnering exclusively with Velcro regarding this technology. So you have your hook and you have your loop. We sell insulation basically with this hook on it, with this facer that has the hook on it. And then of course your RapidLock membrane, that acts as the loop. Okay, so this is available, the membrane is available in EPDM, TPO, and PVC, 115 mil option. So it's going to be 60 mil bareback joined with the 55 mil fleece. The insulation, by the way, you can, it's in stock, I should say. The in-stock options are 1/2 inch Secure Shield HD, 2-inch and 2.6-inch polyiso, standard polyiso, so the insul base, and Secure Shield. Other sizes are available upon special order and request, but those are the in-stock options. And only the top layer, by the way, of insulation needs to have this special facer, of course, because that's where you need that hook between the top layer and the membrane itself to create that bond. People ask me sometimes, they say, is the RapidLock and the FleeceBACK that would be adhered with flexible fast adhesive, are they interchangeable? The answer is no. This is actually a different type of fleece than what we've been talking about previously in this this webinar. So the fleece that's on the FleeceBACK membrane that you adhere with flexible fast adhesive is different from this. So they are not interchangeable. So some of the benefits with this is obviously smell, of course. There's no, give me one second, somebody asked a question. They said, is there damage to the hook when contractors are walking around on it? The answer should be no. People walking around on that insulation, as long as it's not, you know, excessive, should not be causing damage to that. We realize that people have to be able to install the insulation and then be able to walk around on it some. So just to answer that question. So some of the benefits real quick, smell, there's no adhesives. So there's not going to be any smell, obviously, when it comes to this installation. Sound, no sound unless you're installing the insulation with fasteners and plates, which you can install the insulation with our flexible fast adhesive still. That's either fasteners and plates or the flexible fast are perfectly acceptable with this. And then VOCs, obviously there's no VOCs, right? There's no adhesive when it comes to this installation. And then you've got tear resistance and the same puncture resistance benefit that you would get out of a standard FleeceBACK membrane. That's adhered with flexible fast adhesive. And last two would be, we'll say speed. Obviously, it's I'll get to that here in a second, but it's a very quick, easy product to install. And then temperature. So there's really no temperature restriction when it comes to this product, right? So there's no adhesives, no temperature restriction. It is limited to a 20-year, 90-mile-an-hour wind speed warranty. So 20-year warranty, 90-mile-an-hour wind speed warranty at this point. So just to note that. And then it is going to come with a release liner on it. So that is actually what he's removing in this picture that we see right here. So you could set the sheet into place, and then you would actually remove that release liner once it's set into position, and then you would broom it, we say, which is like a soft bristle broom, and then roll it with a 150-pound segmented weighted roller to really engage that bond between the hook and the loop. So some of the, well, let me give the two different methods. Right here, he's doing the slide out method. So they've actually set the sheet into place, and he's actually sliding out that release liner from the underside. There's also, you can barn door it. So you can actually fold this sheet in half, and there's actually a slit in the release liner down the center of this. You can't see it in this picture, but it's the release liner, so on the underside of the sheet. So you can barn door it, remove half that release liner, position the sheet into place, or put it back into place, and then broom it and roll it. So those are basically the methods to actually install this. And there's a lot of detail similarities between RapidLock and the standard FleeceBACK membrane that I've been talking about that's installed with flexible fast adhesive. End laps are stripped in the exact same way as on a FleeceBACK job that's adhered with flexible fast. So the same way that I spoke about on both of these details right here for the TPO and PVC and for the EPDM detail that we see right there. Water cut off mastic areas, we need to singe the fleece on RapidLock just like on FleeceBACK that's installed with flexible fast adhesive. I will say angle changes like at the bases of walls like this, always need to have angle change securement here. We can't utilize this option with RapidLock, but we can basically utilize this option that we see right here. There's a couple different options that you can use with the RapidLock. I don't have time in this webinar to get into those, but again, the specification and details for this system are in the same specification, I should say, or overall specification as our FleeceBACK membrane that's installed with flexible fast adhesive. So if you want to reference those. And then that's really all I had for this particular webinar. I did want to just mention real quick before I answer any other questions. There is a landing page. If you go to carlislesyntec.com, there's an education and training link. You can actually re-listen to the recording of this webinar if you want to, and then you can also look for some of the classes that we have coming up, these in-person trainings that I was referring to at the beginning of this webinar. Other than that, I want to thank everybody who was on this. I hope people got something out of it. And if you have any questions or if I said anything that confused you, please let me know. So. I don't see any coming in. Wait another second. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Eric. Long time no see, Eric. I hope you've been well. All right, awesome. Well, it looks like everybody's doing good. Cool. Well, thank you guys. Take care.